Hello and welcome to this webinar on improving effectiveness with board portals, presented by Corporate Secretary along with our partner in this event, Diligent Board Member Services, whose BoardBooks product is the world's most widely used board portal. I'm Neil Stewart, Editorial and Research Director at Cross Border, the publisher of Corporate Secretary as well as IR Magazine, and I'm your moderator today. We will be live tweeting some of the results and discussion at hashtag CSM Webinar. That's Corporate Secretary Magazine Webinar, CSM Webinar. If you want to follow along with tweets or add your own. As we go along, we also welcome questions from the audience. Just type them into the question box on your webinar screen at any time. Now, today our focus is on the decision to go electronic with a board portal and tackling the transition. Board portals can save companies time and money, yet directors sometimes resist the change, even as iPads and other tablets continue to grow in popularity. But are we at a tipping point? And if so, how can you cope with the switch? How do you take maximum advantage of new ways of distributing materials and controlling access? How can you make the change as smooth and seamless as possible for the corporate secretary, for directors, for C-level executives? Above all, how can you improve the effectiveness of the board? To address these questions and more, we have with us Mary Lynn Gerard, Executive Coordinator of the Board of Directors for the Nemours Foundation, one of the nation's largest nonprofit children's health systems. Mary Lynn has been with Nemours for over 13 years, holding various roles in the legal, compliance, and quality departments. She's been working with the board since 2006. She works closely with the organization's general counsel, coordinating corporate governance matters for 3 boards there at Nemours. It's very nice to have you with us, Mary Lynn. Also, Jeffrey Powell, Executive Vice President of Sales for Diligent Board Member Services, where he is responsible for the development and execution of client acquisition strategies throughout the Americas. Jeff, why don't you start us off with a brief history of board portals and a look at the different ways that boards share information.
Thank you, Neil. I'll be happy to. And we're very happy to be here today from Diligent BoardBooks. I am Jeffrey Powell and very happy to be here with Mary Lynn Gerard, one of our clients, and looking forward to hearing what Mary Lynn has to say about her experience adopting a board portal. For us at Diligent, and hopefully some of you are familiar with us as the premier provider of secure board portals, we really pioneered the development of board portals from a standpoint of wanting to develop a secure, highly intuitive way for companies to distribute materials to their board members to help improve the efficiency of delivery of materials and make it easier for companies to communicate with their boards. Now, it's kind of interesting, the development of the board portal, the history for how we've been providing portals and the development of our industry. We've been providing portals board portals since 2002, long before the tablets came out. So actually, when our system was originally developed, what it was developed for was to ease that process of compiling materials. The people who were tasked with compiling what in some cases, many cases, are voluminous materials to the board going into those enormous paper books that get distributed, our system was designed to make that process easier and then still produce paper books that were delivered to the board members. Over time, board members became interested in accessing these materials electronically, but it still was a little bit of a tough sale to the board. For us, from the standpoint of encouraging companies to adopt board portals, the easiest people to convince were the people on the corporate secretary side who were tasked with compiling these materials because, of course, it made it a lot easier for them. And gradually, board members started using the materials or at least being aware of that they could access the materials electronically. But there was still some hesitance, some reticence on the part of board members to adopt an electronic solution. But over the years, everyone came to recognize that board portals were an acceptable and viable form of corporate governance, an effective means of delivering materials to their board members. And so at the time that the iPad came out, whether or not a board was using an electronic solution, still producing paper books, whether or not a board member had any experience with accessing a board portal, board members knew what a board portal was. And when the tablets came out, particularly the iPad, it turned on a light switch. The light bulb went on, and a board member could now recognize what it meant to them for the ease of access of board materials, how they could receive the board materials much faster, get updates in real time, be able to carry around a large amount of materials on a thin, highly portable device, and also be able to access those materials both when connected to the internet and also when not connected to the internet. So the adoption of board portals just took off, and it's become increasingly more and more of a standard of how board members access materials. Now, in terms of how companies are distributing materials, certainly, it spans the gamut, spans not just the technological gamut, but also the gamut of how materials can be distributed, ranging from many companies which are still producing paper materials up through the various steps of adapting an electronic process, whether or not materials are being emailed out or whether or not perhaps documents are being posted to a site where board members are accessing them, or companies even developing their own internal systems for distributing materials to the board, and then ultimately moving towards a fully functional, fully supported, highly secure board portal. And Neil, I believe we have some information about this.
Yeah, Jeff, thank you for that look at the spectrum of different delivery methods. And in fact, before this webinar, we surveyed the registrants, people of the audience who were registering to attend, and asked them how they currently distribute board materials. And you can see that the number one way currently is email, 43% of our audience. And these are multiple responses. So external board portal, 30%, internal, 13%, email, 43%, and plain old postal mail, still 24%. Using an application for iPad or other device, 18% of our registrants on the call already use a tablet. Now, Jeff, in looking at this, first of all, is 43% a high proportion of our audience to be using email? And for that matter, does the amount of the proportion of our audience, fully a quarter of our audience, still using postal mail, is that alarming from a sort of data security perspective?
Well, it is alarming because one of the things that may not be intuitively obvious for users thinking of switching to an electronic solution is that you actually have better, more secure control of your materials using a board portal. When you are emailing documents or messengering documents, they, of course, may not make it to their intended recipients. Those materials may be sitting in a mailbox or on a doorstep or get left behind. Where if you're distributing materials electronically, particularly in a highly secure solution, then those individual users are the only one accessing those materials. Plus, on the company side, you have the easy ability to pull those materials back.
Well, let's take a live temperature check now of our audience. Can we put up polling question number 1? So this is where we'd like our audience to participate. If you're at a company, a corporate member of our audience, does your company provide directors with iPads or similar tablets? So we want to get you to answer one of these responses. Yes, your company provides them, or B, they use their own, or C, there are no iPads in our boardroom. So let's get a feel for where directors are at just with the adoption of iPads, never mind really going all the way to a full secure online board portal. And Jeff, while the audience is responding, maybe you could tell us a little bit about what your market research tells us about the penetration of tablets in the boardroom, and for that matter of board portals. I know I saw a survey from KPMG that in 2009, only 9% of directors said they were using an online portal. That jumped to 35% the following year, 2011, 50% and climbing. Where are we today?
I think for companies distributing materials electronically, it probably matches up with what we're seeing in these results in terms of whether or not iPads are in the boardroom. I think that fully 80% of companies in North America are distributing materials electronically in some form. That may be emailing, that includes emailing or distributing documents, and I think probably about half of those are using secure board portals.
Well, let's look at the results now of our quick poll. It looks like about 42%, over 2 in 5 of our participants. Companies actually provide iPads or similar tablets. At another almost 40% or 38% of companies, directors use their own, and only about 18% of our participants say there are no iPads in their boardrooms. Let's go to Mary Lynn now. And, you know, as the executive coordinator for the board of directors at Nemours, you've had really a front row seat on the transition to using a board portal. We'd like to hear, or let's start with, you know, how you made the decision to go that electronic method.
Well, thank you. It took a little time. We were first introduced to the board books back in 2009, but it wasn't until 2011 did our board agree to go in that direction. And mostly, I think, because this was really a drastic change to how our board material was delivered. In the past, we mailed hard copy binders to our board members, who oftentimes got up to 4 books. So, and I found that our board members had all different levels of IT experience. So, getting them used to that, I do notice in that time period, they did take more notice of what it took to get that board material to them, asking a lot more questions on how the material is distributed. So they were a little bit more intuitive on that. But
well, as you went along, what were some of the most difficult challenges, or what were some of the real points of resistance?
Points of resistance, change, security. I think they were a lot of times not sure that they could trust that their documents were out there. And so that was a big issue that they had to kind of get used to.
And in terms of your board of directors, what was the kind of different levels of experience or different, you know, types of readiness that they had for change in terms of technology? I'm
sorry, what did you say?
Well, in terms of your board of directors, first of all, how many directors do you work with?
We have 13 directors, and we have two other boards. So in total, we have around 24 board members.
What were the sort of levels of IT experience, and was that a factor in making the transition?
Well, it was a little bit, but I think it wasn't a matter of when we were going to move towards electronic board books, I think, or were we? It was when we were going to move towards it. So I think we've had our board members with no experience with iPads and some that use it every day. So it was a variety of experience.
And how did you go about then, you know, in the terms of training, and for that matter, how early in the process, you know, looking back from 2009 to making the transition in 2011, how early in the process were your directors involved in both the decision-making, which service you used, and then the training and ramping up to the switch? Well, our total process from making the decision to being 100% paperless took about 5 months. And the time period between September and November of 2011 is basically when we provided them with iPads and got them familiar with using an iPad and using the passwords and getting used to downloading applications. And just so that was that. And then we had our training session in November of 2011 for our board members and executives, and I think that was really the turning point for them. That was the aha moment that, yes, this is going to work, because they saw their books on their iPads and were familiar with seeing the information that they are used to seeing in hard copy and the quality that it delivered. And I think that was really very important. That was the key then. So by February at our next quarterly meeting, we were 100% paperless. That's amazing. So really that was the turning point, the aha moment, as you say, seeing the board book on their iPad with the Nemours logo and everything, right? Just like Correct. The real thing. Mm-hmm. And this product that we're talking about actually looks like a book. It doesn't look just like another sort of computer application. It looks like a book, right? Right, right. And our board members are on several different boards, and we have one board member who has Diligent board books for 3 of his boards. He's got one login, and that just makes it so much easier for him when he's traveling or going from board meeting to board meeting. It's just made his life easier. So, but the directors do find that they can view their information on the airplane. They can sync their book and still look at all the information on the airplane, because they do most of their reviewing when they're traveling.
So, Mary Lynn, when you're talking about that syncing, I mean, what you're talking about is them having the ability to still access the materials when not connected to the Internet.
Correct, yes.
And that is a very important part of the director experience for reasons like you're saying, of being able to be on an airplane with their iPad in airplane mode, still being able to access those materials within the system, taking advantage of that book-like functionality.
Right, yes.
Okay, excellent point. So let's take a look now again to a temperature check of our audience. And, I was asking you, Mary Lynn, kind of what were the biggest pain points or points of resistance. Let's ask the audience now, if you are not already using a board portal, what is the main reason why? So again, let's just see about where the sort of points of resistance are. And that is A, our board simply prefers paper. B, is cost concerns. C, data security risks, or D, we haven't considered it. Now, Jeff, Mary Lynn mentioned both just general sort of maybe a little bit of reluctance to change, but also the concerns about security. Are those common points of resistance or pain points for your clients?
Well, they can be. Because, of course, security is a very important part of the decision to make such a big change in an organization. But it really does come back to the educational process of people understanding that the materials are actually more secure and you have greater control over them about distributing them electronically. Of course, when a company is making this decision to go to a board portal, the IT people at the company are going to be involved, the security people, the risk management people, and, a solid, secure board portal is, of course, going to, be able to stand up to all of that questioning and all of that testing about the delivery of the materials. But I think that it's also easy for the end user, the board member, to understand that having the materials electronically that are always highly encrypted, that are very secure in a system that they have to be authorized to access to log into is much more secure than carrying around paper books.
Indeed. Okay. So, in fact, it doesn't increase security. It actually, it doesn't increase security risk. It reduces it. Let's take a look at now at the results and see what our audience has said. And in fact, somewhat surprisingly, I think one of the key points here that our audience has raised is cost concerns, and that to me is surprising, Jeff, because really what you're talking about is less employee labor to be printing out and compiling paper books, and less, overall, there is the possibility of even reducing costs. Is that correct?
Well, that is correct, and it is an interesting point, and it's another one of those things that may not always be intuitively obvious. Not that long ago, Neil, I was here in New York at a very large corporation who was looking at our product, and I was talking to their general counsel, and we were talking about these cost concerns and return on investment. And I asked him, well, how much do you spend now on the production of your board materials? And he looked at me blankly for a second and said, nothing, because it was just costs that are all absorbed into operational costs. He was not actually thinking about the amount of time that goes into the people who have to produce the materials, the production costs, the shipping costs, the tremendous waste that's involved of delivering these materials that then most of the time are ultimately destroyed. And companies do have to look at these things. They do have to think about the benefits of, some of our clients experience as much as a 90% reduction in the amount of time it takes to produce their materials. Not only is it then cheaper to deliver them because they're not messengering them, it's much faster. And so there's a variety of hard costs that are saved. It can also be that maybe you don't have to have as many in-person meetings. Some of them can be done remotely. So you have to look at the hard costs, but then there are other costs that, have to be measured by an individual company about, what is the value of getting more materials more quickly distributed to your board members, knowing that whatever anyone is looking at is the most current version of a document. You never have to worry about somebody looking at the wrong materials. What are the benefits of, giving your board members more tools, more effectiveness in doing their job? How does that increase, the dollars and cents at your company in addition to the hard costs? But, yes, it's absolutely true that for many of our clients, switching to the board portal actually saves them money than from producing hard copy materials.
Okay, good. Okay. Now, listen, several members of our audience have asked if they can get slides sent to them after this webinar, and the answer is that Diligent will be sending out the slide deck to those members of our audience who opted to hear from Diligent upon registration. Also, anyone who specifically asks that question or mentions it in the question box today, Diligent will also send the slides directly to them. So hopefully that answers that question. A reminder also to the audience, we'd be happy to take your questions at any time. We already have a couple of very good on-point questions that we could address. The first one is how you deal with management coming to meetings that may not have an iPad or have access to the same board books that the directors do. So are they expected to bring their own materials since they won't be viewing materials like a board member or executive leadership staff? So that's a good question for Mary Lynn. How does it work at Nemours when you have people who are attending the board meetings who may not be on the board, who may not have access to the same materials?
Well, our senior leaders all have iPads, and we do have a few guests. At those times, they can also have the laptop accessibility. We can also print out just the portions that they'll be presenting at the meeting. But in general, our executives and board members all do have Diligent board books on their iPads and computers. So there are ways to make it work for your situation. It's just that's not what we do.
And in terms of the sort of access to different materials, is that something that you are able to easily control? That is, if there's someone who is coming to the meeting, has access to materials, but maybe not all the materials?
Well, that was a big concern when we were looking for an application, and we needed the ability to be able to hide some of our documents from certain groups of people, and only because it's very sensitive. It was our compensation committee, especially in February, and we can manage that. We can hide a whole book, or we can hide a document for just one person or 10 people. It's very flexible to what we need. So that was really important to us when we were looking for a product.
Okay. Jeff, do you have anything to add on that in terms of people attending meetings who may not have an iPad in front of them or access to the same materials as the board?
Sure. Well, I think that Mary Lynn did a really great job of covering that. But, I mean, first off, let me say that most of our clients do give users outside of the board access to the portal as well. I mean, because we call it a board portal, people tend to think of it as something that only the board uses, but that's not the case. I mean, it's usually executives, management, sometimes even outside auditors or guests and visitors who might need access to the portal. Also, as Mary Lynn was saying, it's a product that's not limited to the iPad. I mean, whereas, yes, right now the iPad is far and away the predominant choice of how users access the system, users can also access it on a laptop. And also the company controls whether or not that user is just viewing materials online or has the ability to download them. So whereas you may want to give your board members that offline capability, you may have other users who are logging in perhaps on a laptop just to view the materials online. And also, as Mary Lynn mentioned, the system still enables her to print. I mean, most of our clients are, of course, paperless, but the system does not require you to be paperless. You can still very easily print out documents or even an entire book from our system that comes out in this collated, paginated format.
And that is actually part of our process. We do keep one hard copy book with original signed signatures in a safe at our home office. And so it's really important that we could print a complete book as it was delivered to our board. And so that was a good feature. It also has a feature where you can export the document in full in a PDF single document that's made record keeping for the electronic record keeping for myself very easy.
Good point. Okay. Now, we have a couple of quick questions here that have come in from the audience that maybe we should take care of right now. One of them refers to what you were just talking about, Jeff, and that is access to a variety of different devices. And the question is it best practice to have board members able to use a variety of devices from laptop to iPad to Android, or should it, if possible, be limited to a single device? I mean, are there any advantages to saying only iPads, even though the technology could be used on the other devices?
Well, I think that type of control that you're talking about really applies itself to the online and offline features. I mean, for example, our system enables a user to log in from any of these devices in an online capacity where they can go online, view materials, they can't download materials, you can prevent them from printing something, and also the system is not going to leave anything on that computer. So from a fail-safe standpoint, you may want to give your users always the ability to access materials online because, say, I'm a board member, I'm traveling, or I'm someplace, maybe I don't have my iPad or it runs out of power, I'm stuck in an airport, I can go into the lounge, go online, access the system in a highly secure method. I think that what people really want to control is how people handle that offline capability, where maybe you're only allowing them to download materials to their iPad, and they cannot download them, for example, onto a laptop.
And it may also be that you are only allowing them to download certain materials, right? Could there be highly secure documents that you don't want stored locally anywhere?
Yes, and that's actually an excellent point. And these type of security controls about not just the downloading of documents, but the materials that users can access them, what they can do with them, it's very granular within our system. You know, you can have certain documents that no one can download, no one can print, but you can also control that on a user-by-user basis. So say, for example, you and I could have access to the same materials, but there would be different controls over what we could do with them.
Okay. And just another very quick question about different devices. One of the audience members is asking about the Microsoft Surface. Is that, are you able to offer board books on that?
From a development standpoint, you know, we're always looking to have the product work to its maximum efficiency on whatever device the market demands. And from a development standpoint, that's all that I can say about that right at the moment.
Okay. And of course, I guess from what I know of the Microsoft Surface, it's very much running the same or converging with Microsoft Desktop operating system. So I'm sure that it should be seamless, right? Let's talk a little bit more with Mary Lynn and a little bit about some of the lessons that you learned along the way. I mean, for example, has it changed the way your board works in terms of its consumption of information? Does it now able to consume more information?
It is. It's kept them really engaged. They have the option to access archived books on their iPad or their laptop when they're using the system, and that's really helped because the old way we used to do it, they would call me, ask me to look up a topic at a meeting that they had maybe 3 years ago that they had a question about, and so here they can just go. I can look that up and tell them what book to look for, but they can go into that book and find the actual document that they're looking for. So it's, as reference material, it's very helpful for them.
And do you ever worry about information overload? Does the ease of adding information to a board portal risk overloading directors with information?
It hasn't so far. Let's just put it that way. It hasn't so far. I think it's helped because we break into committees, and not every board member goes to every committee. So this gives them the option to see what the other board member is seeing in their committee. And so when they report out to the full board, they can pretty much have the same documents that they're referring to.
Okay. And Jeff, from your perspective and your experience, what are some of the other aha moments or things that directors realize through the course of adopting a board portal that really is changing the way they work?
Well, I think that for a lot of, I mean, Mary Lynn was talking about the aha moment was when they saw the materials on the iPad that resonates with them because it looks and feels the same as a book. And there's more to that as well because, I mean, one of the things that we've always tried to convey is that it's in a lot of ways the same as a paper book, but better. So sometimes board members don't realize that when they're accessing the materials on the iPad, they can still write notes on it. They can write notes or highlight text directly onto the screen of the device. They don't lose these capabilities. If there's something where they still want to print out a document so that they, so that they can read it someplace else, they still have that capability. I think for a lot of the board members, the aha moment is realizing that it's a system that's not taking anything away from them. It's actually giving them additional tools.
Okay, now we have a few questions here that risk taking us into some kind of legal weeds. We don't want to get lost in there, but maybe quickly we can address these. One of them is for Mary Lynn, and this is about keeping information, keeping historical information in the board portal. And can this become an e-discovery issue? Is there the risk of, that your board books, electronic board books, even the director annotations in there could be an e-discovery issue in the future?
I'm not sure I'm versed to speak to that.
Mary Lynn, I'd like to say a couple of things like that because, again, within our system, what it's designed to replicate is what it's like to have paper books. So, yes, board members can write notes in the system. They can highlight text. But, that's while the books are active or what we call current. When a client archives their books, puts them into storage, what they're putting into storage are clean books. Nobody's notes, nobody's highlights. It's really the same as if you're keeping, a clean, bound paper copy of your board materials after a meeting. That's what our system replicates. That's what it gives you. And so in terms of board member communication or board member access, our system does not provide any, additional sort of, e-discoverability issues over those paper books.
Okay. Now, a few other little sort of technical type of questions. One of them is prior to finalizing, can I edit the board book with just a few of the directors? And, this is an interesting point, Mary Lynn. I know that you like the fact about board books that you can keep updating them right up until the last moment, right up until the time of the meeting, right?
Correct, yes. You can add documents. One nice thing is you can see typos within minutes of reading it because it's so clear. The documents are so clear and easy to read, and it's helped that way. But, yes, you can add the presentations that you got at the last minute, and they want to see on their iPad also. So we download that the day of the meeting also.
Okay, good. And here's another question, good question from the audience. So far the discussion has been about posting a regular board meeting materials. That is, this kind of pre-meeting board book type of materials. What about companies using tablet portals as repository of other items of interest, I would imagine, between meetings and throughout the year, research reports, news stories, stock ownership updates, and so on? Jeff, are you seeing a lot of that?
Yeah, absolutely. And the portal is designed for that. Of course, in a lot of ways, the bread and butter is this distribution of current materials and the retention of archived materials. But the portal is also designed to house any of this other information, whether or not it's corporate governance materials or board members' handbooks or minutes books or outside research information or research tools, press releases, newsletters, calendars, questionnaires, surveys, even resolution and consent items. These are all basic parts of the portal.
Okay. We're very fortunate to have some very good questions coming in from the audience. And here's a sort of interesting one. One slide that we showed reference going beyond paperless. And this person asked, how can the tablet-related technology be used to do more than simply deliver the printed word in an electronic manner? And right off the bat, as a kind of newcomer to this whole topic, I would say, well, video is one area. But, Jeff, when we talk about beyond paperless, what are companies doing?
Well, I think that, companies are just using the electronic solution to really improve the speed and volume of materials that they're providing to their board members. And so, you also touched on, doing things in between meetings. It actually gives you, greater outreach to your board members. It's not, It's not designed to just be something where you only use it, quarterly at your board meetings. It's really designed as the mechanism for which you're going to produce all of your materials and all of your communication with your board. And so what we typically see, and Mary Lynn, I don't know if this has been the case for you, but what we typically see is that when a company starts using the portal, initially what it is for is just that distribution of their board materials, but as they use it more, they start distributing more materials, not just to the board, but to other groups, and also bringing in other users. Exactly.
We have added, and we're still changing and adding and developing our board book. We've added a board governance section, which includes our bylaws, committee charters, annual reports. And I just want to make note that you can have the best program and the best board book, but communication is still very important for your board, because they need to know. They won't know that the documents are there unless you communicate with them. And I just wanted to make that point. I just found that that's really important when going through the training and also the delivery of material.
Okay. Mary Lynn, we have one little final question here from the audience, and that's about, do you use the reference section or library on the board portal for documents other than the board committee content, such as for policies, terms of reference, and so on? Have your directors asked you to place certain reference documents in there?
Yes, and that you can build any which way you prefer. So that's why the application is so great, because you can gear it towards your committee or the structure of your board.
Okay. And Jeff, just one final question for you. We had this one come in before the event by one of the registrants, and it's a good question about the transition or the training to an electronic board portal. The question is this: my sense is that lack of ownership and commitment to technology by the board is one of the greatest risks to successful implementation. Care needs to be taken by management not to take on this cause too aggressively if the board isn't fully on side and supportive. The question is, would you share this perspective? So about that sort of rollout, Jeff, how is it best handled?
Well, I think that is an excellent question, and it is an important point, because it goes back to what I was talking about making it clear to the board that you're not taking anything away from them, you're giving them additional tools. And I think that more and more as companies are looking at board portals and moving towards electronic solutions, they are involving the board in this decision making. And so I think that that is important, so that the board feels like they're involved and they feel like it's something that's being done for the benefit of everyone in the company. And I think that it's also then important when you're looking at a board portal to be working with a company like ours that understands this process and has a system that's not only designed to help you transition from paper to an electronic solution, but also has a very specific and generous training methodology of providing unlimited training and supports to each user. Most companies that come to us, their boards have an array of technological capabilities and comfort level, from those who are already using iPads, already using board portals, to maybe those who are getting or seeing an iPad for the first time. And you need to be working with a provider who understands this and can help bring along each user on their own comfort level to maximize the efficiency of the portal.
And can I add to that how important customer service is? And that was my biggest fear when we took this on, that we would get the program and then I would have to be there 24/7 for our board. And so having a good customer service support system that can help our directors get through the hurdles of logins and connections, that was really important to us, and it has been very positive service.
And so was that Mary Lynn, did that put a lot of pressure on your own IT people, or really was customer service help take that pressure off your IT people?
They did. They took it off our IT people. If the director will go to me first, and then I will call Diligent technical support, or they will directly, if it's 10 o'clock at night and they decide that they wanted to read their board books, So it has been, the customer service has been excellent, and I just wanted to make that point.
Okay. Well, as we prepare to wrap up this webinar, there is one final question that came in, and it says, we do use Board Portal to distribute all those other materials and reference materials, and it's great. It has changed the game. But my question is, what is around the corner, the next big thing? And you know what? I think maybe we'll save that for the next webinar. Watch this space and tune in next time to find out what is the next big thing. But right now, I want to say thank you very much to Diligent Board Member Services for partnering with Corporate Secretary on this webinar, to Jeffrey Powell, Executive Vice President of Sales for Diligent. It's been a real pleasure talking to you, Jeff. And, of course, to Mary Lynn Gerard, Executive Coordinator of the Board of Directors for the Nemours Foundation. Mary Lynn, thank you very much for joining our discussion.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Neil.
Thank you, and thanks to our audience for your excellent questions. There will be follow-up for those who have requested it in terms of slides and answering specific questions. But thank you very much for listening. Goodbye.